My name is April Lewton, and I serve as Vice President of Development and Marketing with the National Benevolent Association. This year marks year 10 in this role on staff and in leadership with NBA. I joined in June of 2012 along with my colleague Rebecca. And I am so excited to be here to this kind of milestone of a moment of just taking pause to recognize that 10 years have gone by. One of the things I think about when I consider 10 years, in the life of NBA, it really is kind of a blip in the life of this ministry. You know, NBA is the Health and Social Services General Ministry of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, has been in existence for over 135 years. And the people and the leaders and the communities that have been part of this ministry are as old as our whole church, as our whole denomination. And so these 10 years is just really a part of this larger story that is the ministry of NBA. Our work today in this ministry looks very different than when even 10 years ago or in our historic past, in our past as a ministry. I think today NBA's ministries of health and social services are about responding to the needs in the community with nonprofit organizations, with leaders that are leading those nonprofit organizations. There is a lot of diversity and breadth of strength and ability to respond, in many ways like a flexibility to respond to the needs that are out in the world and in communities across US and Canada today. So 10 years in the life of NBA is a bit of a short tenure, really, but I remain grateful to be a part of the ministry.
I'm Rebecca Hale, Executive Vice President at the National Benevolent Association, and I joined the NBA in February of 2012, 10 years ago. I was thinking about this 10th anniversary and really thinking about what 10 years means to me in the life of NBA. 10 years ago when I joined the staff at NBA, NBA had a rich history that spanned well over a century. For me, it's really important to always acknowledge those people that have gone before, those faithful Christians, those faithful disciples who built this ministry for over a century, who really, in some ways, saved lives and eased the path of life for so many more. There were so many faithful disciples that built the NBA. And yet, about 10 years ago, when April, my colleague behind me, and I joined the staff, it also can be said that it was a little bit of a fallow time for NBA, that the programmatic life, the mission and ministry of NBA was really needing to reshape and refocus to be vibrant, to be effective, to be faithful for the 21st century. Honestly, even 10 years later, I really continue to be grateful every day to have this job, to be a part of this ministry, where there's an organizational-wide commitment to trying to get to a yes in terms of meeting people where they are, for what they both bring and what they need. NBA is a ministry where we say we have to have a high degree of tolerance for ambiguity and be flexible, and that is certainly true. It's one of the best parts of NBA's ministry is that we work with one another and with our partners to hear what's really needed, to hear appropriate ways of supporting and accompanying our partners, and then we work to get there with one another.
Definitely, like so many people 2.5 years ago, the realities of the work, the realities of my life changed with the pandemic. And so NBA, we already were working in a remote setting, but we had to keep into consideration the safety of the communities and the partners that we worked alongside. So we went a lot more virtual. Instead of hosting a lot of our events for leadership development or training, we took that virtual. So for example, this year's Social Entrepreneur Seminar will be virtual and over the course of several weeks in September. So in some ways, MBA, because of the character and culture of who we are, we took a moment to pause, and then we got to work. We got to work knowing that there were a lot of communities and individuals that needed us to continue this work of creating communities of compassion and care.
One of the things for me is the staff, the team. The staff of NBA is hands down the most creative, most committed, most vulnerable, transparent, fully present to each other group of people I've ever had the privilege of walking alongside. One of NBA has some culture statements, and we say if we're living into these culture statements, we're being who we said we want to be, who we say we want to be in this work. One of those culture statements, for instance, is we strive for intentional repair when things go awry. That's just a little example. So if April and I, for instance, behind me, we've been working together 10 years. Not every one of those days has been great. I mean, I'll admit there are times when I'm not my best, or April hasn't been her best. Those culture statements mean April and I sit down and talk about that. We don't talk about a third party. We don't gloss over it. We sit down and we talk about it, even when it's hard, even when the healing is more than a conversation, even when it takes time to gain that trust again. Those are the things I couldn't do without.
When I think about MBA and what I could not do without, I think my colleague Rebecca said it first, is I couldn't do without the people. I couldn't do without my colleagues, my staff that I work alongside every day. I'm grateful to spend as many hours as I do on Zoom with them, or traveling alongside them, or sending those variety of communications to communicate and to connect about the work that we do. It is inspiring and amazing to know that so many qualified and committed and faithful people want to be part of this work. And I have the beautiful opportunity to do that with them every day.
I will say the other story that stands out for me is that time following the death of Michael Brown here in Ferguson, Missouri. To be with a team of people who understood that as a moment of justice crisis, and who were committed to reshaping internal and external life to meet that moment, and then a community that stuck with those commitments for the long haul that have brought us here at this day in this place.
When I think about a moment or a tangible memory over the years with MBA, I first have to start with my exposure and initial connection with MBA, which was through the MBA Leadership Scholars Program. It was an amazing opportunity while I was in college to receive a scholarship and grant from MBA, which then connected me to a whole host of individuals and leaders and networks across the church, as well as introduced me to the kind of the work of what it means to be a nonprofit. I like to say I had the chance to cut my teeth in fundraising by learning from so many professionals and senior fundraisers, as well as communicators and storytellers in those early years that I was connected to MBA.
I've been changed. My identity has been shaped. I've been personally changed by these 10 years of NBA. One of the ways that has happened is I kind of knew when I came to NBA that I like to work on the big picture vision, that I like to work on strategies, that I was a strategic thinker. But NBA has given me the gift of living fully into that identity, of really expanding what I understand to be sort of vision making, what I understand to be solid strategies that are transparent, that are inclusive, that are slow enough to hear all the voices that need to be heard, that are inclusive enough to really be appropriate for those that we accompany in this time. That's a great gift. That's a part of my identity that's been developed at NBA. And I will say the other part of my identity that I think has been shaped by NBA is this equity journey that I've already referenced. The equity journey that I've already referenced. White supremacy culture, systemic racism, they shape our institutions. They shape our individual lives. They have certainly been the waters in which I swim. It has been a great personal journey, not always easy, but always essential to be on this equity journey so that I can accompany the people I work with day in and day out in a way that comes from deep inner reflection about who I am and what it means to be a white, older, a white, older woman working in the world today. The waters in which I was formed don't need to be the waters in which I swim anymore. That there is the ability to really examine myself, examine my community, examine the systems of which I'm a part, to live into a more equitable vision for the future, more equitable values, more human ways of connecting with one another. So I've been very shaped by this. I hope I can say in another 10 years that I am still being shaped by those same kind of values, those same kind of challenges to the systems in which I'm a part and to the way I personally walk through the world.
When I think about how MBA has informed my own identity and story, it's the power of being able to, for so many years, be in conversation and be in collaboration and collegiality with some amazing leaders. These are folks who, whether they're trained in ministry or trained in social services or trained in so many different ways, it's this meeting of faithful and amazing minds and spirits in the midst of this work. And I am privileged and honored to be able to be a part of the journey of so many. And that really, their strengths, their learnings, their stories, they've informed who I am. And I'm so grateful